On that note, we're going to move to take some questions from the audience. We have a microphone here, so if you have some question, perhaps you could come up, and if it's to a particular person, you could address it to that person or to the panel. Feel free. And please. Thank you.
Do we have French translation?
I believe
available or not?
So, yes.
Okay. Paul, est-ce que vous préférez que je pose la question en français ou en anglais?
En français pour faire changement.
En français. OK. Vous avez dit que pour vous, le métier d'art, c'était une façon de penser plutôt qu'une façon de faire. Et puis que c'était plus lié à votre façon de penser que de faire. Votre travail a évolué beaucoup au cours des 15 dernières années. De plus en plus, vous faites appel à des gens en Chine pour matérialiser les idées que vous conceptualisez. Et de quelle façon est-ce que votre pensée a changé au cours de ces années-là pour évoluer comme ça?
D'abord, c'était une opportunité d'aller en Chine et de travailler de manière collaborative avec toute une ville qui fait le même travail que je fais.
Oui.
Oh, attends.
Alors, c'était une opportunité de travailler en Chine de cette manière-là. Ça a duré presque 10 ans maintenant, mais c'est terminé à peu près complètement. Le travail que j'ai à la Ottawa School of Art est du travail que j'ai entièrement fait par moi-même.
Ah, OK.
Et c'était pas nécessairement une révolution dans mon travail. C'était juste une opportunité. Ce qui a été très intéressant, c'est que c'est très efficace de fonctionner comme ça. On peut faire énormément de travail très rapidement. Donc, on peut générer des idées très rapidement parce qu'on n'a pas à les réaliser soi-même. Ce qui est un avantage de temps en temps, parce que c'est très lent faire de l'artisanat. Ça prend beaucoup de temps.
Vous conceptualisez sur Internet, sur ordinateur et puis...
Aussi.
Oui, OK.
Mais c'est pas parce qu'on fait quelque chose de différent qu'on arrête de faire les autres choses. Moi, j'aime bien faire 3, 4, 5 affaires en même temps.
Okay.
Donc, oui, comme par exemple de travailler avec les ordinateurs. En fait, la raison pour laquelle j'ai travaillé de cette manière-là en Chine et la raison pour laquelle je travaille avec les technologies médiatiques ou virtuelles maintenant, c'est parce que ça me permet de me contester moi-même. Dans le sens que je ne pensais pas vouloir travailler collaborativement et que j'aimerais pas ça et que je ne pourrais pas faire ça. Alors, je me suis dit, essayons-le. Et bien, ça a très bien fonctionné. Et la même chose avec les ordinateurs, qui est une technologie que je résiste énormément. Alors, je me dis, mais pourquoi la résister? Pourquoi pas voir qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire avec ça?
Mais ça reste une pensée métier d'art parce que vous connaissez votre matériau et puis que vous ne pourriez pas concevoir sans avoir cette connaissance profonde-là de l'histoire de la céramique et puis du matériel lui-même.
Oui, c'est ça. Faire, et c'est très important. Mon travail est très technique, très matériel, très... Mais c'est pas ça qui est important pour moi. C'est qu'en faisant les choses, ça me permet de penser d'une certaine manière. Et c'est ça qui m'intéresse. Okay. Et je trouve qu'on devrait valoriser ça aussi davantage. C'est que la communauté tend à promouvoir et juste de la façon dont on en parle, on parle des matériaux, on parle des processus, on parle des outils, on parle de la manière de faire. Mais on ne parle pas beaucoup de la raison pour laquelle on le fait, du rôle que ça joue dans la société, de la manière dont ça crée des expériences pour les gens, de la manière dont ça affecte leur vie, de la manière dont ça agit sur la société, tout ça. Et ça aide pas beaucoup la perception qu'on a à l'extérieur, parce que surtout dans le monde de l'art, ils ne sont pas très intéressés par ces choses-là, d'une manière. Donc, il faut élever notre discours pour pouvoir jouer avec eux autres, si tu veux.
OK. Merci beaucoup. En tout cas, c'était très intéressant.
I do think that this emerging subtext about how crafts is thought, and it's certain kinds of thoughts. I do think that this is something spotted, something new, something we can begin to work with. Please.
Hi, my name's Jane. I'm a potter. This question is for Michael, who's not a potter. It has to do with your comments about internship and the sustainability of the craft through that type of training. I'm very interested to hear that. The potters in Britain are going through a similar thing right now where they're trying to formalize their apprenticeship and intern systems. And of course, the Germans do it really well. And you appear to have a great program going in the States. In order for us to institute something like that in Canada, I'd like to hear about the different organizations you do deal with, who do support you, or perhaps they don't, I don't know, you can tell us. Things like educational institutions, government bodies, trade unions, or like the Red Seal trade guys, those sort of organizations. And what do you see as the role of the crafts federations and councils in supporting that through our advocacy and membership programs?
Promotion, publicizing programs that or opportunities that are available certainly is well done through organizations like the Ontario Crafts Council and the other provincial organizations. But you mentioned Germany as having a very good sort of apprenticeship style program. Well, I've had the absolute opposite experience. I was on an exchange in Germany, and it happened that I was there during their annual AGM. And, things are happening in German, so I've, sort of got a sense of what I'm going to see. And I had this notion that I was going to go to this AGM, and there would be hundreds of people from across Germany at this AGM. And when we got there, and it was a significant drive and so on, when we got there, there was about maybe 7 people in the entire room. Their idea of craft is much different than ours. Their idea of craft is much more industrial than ours. So there's 2 different things going on, I believe, between Europe and North America. But having said that, I think for our experience here, it is important that we at least make it known the different different directions you can go in, is what it amounts to. And I don't think that's always broadcast in a thorough manner. So, in a way, I think it's up to the organizations to ramp up their visibility and so on, to have more exhibitions, more newspaper articles, and so on, to improve the visibility of what's going on.
And so what groups, organizations, and bodies have you worked with in terms of creating internships?
In the past, I've been on the board of directors for 2 terms for an organization that, interestingly enough, started in Canada, but kind of fell flat, and moved to the U.S., and it's called Woodlinks, and it's an industry-led initiative to improve vocational training in high schools. All right. Now, the reason I got involved was, I became aware of the organization, but they were promoting vocational training as strictly an industrial, job-oriented pursuit. And I thought, whoa, hold on a minute. That's the old industry. That's the old way of looking at things. I believe that our community has significance when it comes to creative input, and that this organization that already exists, they could broaden their mandate out to include a more creative end of woodworking. Those students, you have to picture a student in Idaho in a high school wood shop, and the whole notion of getting involved in some program within the high school so that person can go and work in a factory, I don't think so. But if that organization is able to illustrate that there are, much more creative endeavors available, then absolutely perfect. But it also, I think, it's up to us to not only illustrate the creative potential, but also the financial potential of what we're doing. And it goes from one end to the other. There's some people that are gloriously happy not making a living from what they're doing, and they're happy, to do something else in order to support it. And then there's other people who it's really important for them to be able to make some level of income from their passion. And so, we've got to address a broader spectrum that way.
I also like the idea about co-opting existing organizations.
Hi, my name is Kelly, and I'm here from Newfoundland. And my question has to do with some comments, Paul, that you made, but I want to direct it to all three of you. So, Paul, you talked about trying to reposition our practices and trying to have a different discourse of conceptualization. And I just wonder, I'm thinking that a lot of this stems from the education. These are the institutions that we are the teachers in, some of us, and these are the institutions that we all learn to get the skills to be an artist or be a craftsperson, whatever the hell you want, right? But I just wonder, with respect to having to change, when we talk about this kind of melting pot of all these practices coming together, do you see changes in the two institutions that you work for? Emily Carr, I think you teach at, don't you? And you're at NASCAD. Do you see changes in those institutions that are reflecting that melting? Because I can say that I graduated in 1991 from NASCAD, and at that time there was a craft division and there was the fine art division. And I've really been schizophrenic ever since. And it's true, right? Because your history is art history, your discourse is with other painters, and you're all in there together. But I just wonder, do you see any changes coming up? And if not, how can we affect those changes for the generations coming up? And also, I think that your point about no curators being here is ridiculous. I came to the institution tonight thinking, wow, we're having this here, and surely there'll be people from the National Gallery here. So I think that I would urge everybody in here to write an individual letter, and from craft councils it could be a letter, and we need to kick up a little bit of shit. Thank you.
I invited them.
I know. What did you say?
You do want to say anything
Any
about
further
that?
response to the previous question?
So what's happening in school? Do you see change?
Institutional organization, I don't think it's still NASCAD has a fine art division and craft division. It's still same. But then we aware as a craft division faculty, we aware of, and then also what's the trend, there's a craft discourse. So it took for a long time for us to have a craft historian in history department, and then constant push from our division that to administration that we need, even within history department, we really have to constantly push that we need our students. Yes.
And is any craft history compulsory for graduation?
Yes, we do have two. Yes, there's a 2 level of craft history has to be required for their graduation.
Great, thank you. Please. Oh, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to say that it's very interesting. There is a book that just came out called The Last Art School about NASCAD, written by Gary Neal Kennedy. Yes. And I don't think the word craft appears in the whole book. It's a brick that old part of the school is completely invisible in the history of this institution. There's nothing at all about craft. You know, Walter Ostrom is mentioned as a participant in a performance in 1979. That's it. Okay. Now I teach at Immunicar in Vancouver, and it's the advantage is that we don't have a craft division because we're the only craft-based practice in the whole school, the ceramic program. So we're very much embedded with the school. And it's a school where you can have a lot of agency. You know, if you don't like the way things are, you just change them. If you want to do something, you say, I want to do this, and you make it happen, and you get a lot of support for that. So I really value that, and it's basically the reason why I went to teach there, because where I was before, you couldn't do anything. And I wanted to do things, because I don't just bitch all the time. I do things, you know. So I instituted an history of ceramic course, and I teach seminars, and they're very popular with any students because they're not just for the ceramic students, they're for any students wanting to get a credit in art history. So I have photographers and painters and designers in my course, and that's good.
I went to Kootenai School of the Arts in Nelson, and we did a really amazing clay history of the world through ceramics. And just for anyone, it's really lovely to go through history of the world, not through war. It's definitely important. I wanted to ask about, I left Canada 10 years ago, and I'm recently back, feel quite confident in my craft. I'm just wondering if you can give any hints as to where you would focus attention, what groups to join or people to write to, sort of to elevate a craftsperson at that stage in returning to Canada. I also knew west of Canada, and when I left, there was quite a big divide between Eastern craft, Western craft in Canada. I felt just the communication between East and West wasn't so good. I'm wondering if you think that's become better, if artists East Coast, West Coast know each other better. I know that some of you teaching go back and forth, but the different craftspeople, maybe that's enough.
And your name, please.
Sorry?
Your
Kate
name.
Douglas.
Thank you.
Thanks.
What is your media?
Pottery, ceramics.
Pottery, yeah.
Yep, art.
I mean, personally, I'm not aware of there's a, Eastern West division.
Okay.
I just simply doesn't know, so I'm not sure that how I'm gonna
Do you
comment.
know of the West Coast jewelers
Yes.
as much? Yeah, okay.
Not a lot, I know the few,
Yeah.
but the...
And are they teachers? Is it because of them teaching that you know of them, or... I guess
yes,
no, sorry,
through teaching, and then I know the faculties in ACAD, and then the faculty in the Vancouver Community College, and then we get some of a lot of transfer students from Vancouver Community College, so we, get to know their curriculums, and also Kootenai as well. So I don't know whether that's a division, or I thought that maybe you talked about it more organization, institutional thing. Organization?
I guess just in terms of support and understanding on what's going on each side, and like when I was educated on where to go when I was out there, it was very much what galleries to apply to in the West. And now I'm here, I feel lost in that I've been away from Canada, but also that I learnt about where to go and what organizations to join in the perspective of being out West and looking to be, Vancouver and Calgary, and anyway, so here I am, and I think it's a whole new thing, potentially because I've been gone from the country for so long, but also because I was educated in the West.
I'm not sure, because it's they brought it up, the country total, I'm not grow up here, so since I lived in Nova Scotia since 1995, and before that I lived in Montreal for 11 years. And one thing I know that Canada is just a big country. Just a big country. And then also a lot of organization it's my view, organization is organized by province. So they really, so what I do is instead of trying to reaching it out, when I had students from Winnipeg or from Vancouver, so always I try to once they are in Halifax, try to be involved in organization like a craft council, always affiliate with that because you will get a lot of information. But once you go back home, wherever you are going, you always, I just advise them, affiliate with the organization, and then that's where you get a lot of information. And if being in school is the best place to get a lot of information, because most of the teacher knows across, Canada, but that's usually my advice to most of recent graduates.
I spoke with you in the lobby. Your partner's a furniture maker.
That's right.
So I can only really speak about that little corner of things. But in any case, I get phone calls, emails, and so on from people exactly in your position. They're returning to Canada and they want to pick up their career or transfer from one place to another. I am absolutely more than happy to pass on anything I can. Now, I don't know your partner's work, but if it's appropriate, I can give them the name and phone numbers of my clients, the people that I think are important that they should know. I can make an introduction, give them phone numbers and the rest of it. And I would hope there would be somebody in your area that would do the same for you.
Yeah.
So the way I look at it, there's a competition. Having more people do this is absolutely fantastic, and that if I can help somebody out by passing along anything I know, it actually helps me out too, because it increases the visibility.
You'll need to use the microphone.
I did just want to say that there is a provincial crafts council in every province, and that's our role, is to actually be there and to be that conduit to whatever opportunities exist. So I'm the executive director of the Ontario Crafts Council. There's an executive director of every provincial crafts council in this room right now. And not only are we here for this symposium, but we're here for the next 2 days to actually talk and actually collaborate and bring ideas together. So there is a lot of communication across the country. And we publish now a national magazine, which is Studio Magazine, and that's probably the best place to get conversations about what is really going on across the country.
I'm just going to take a moment just to remind everybody that the CCF FCMA is not an independent body overseeing everybody else. It is the flowering of the craft councils. It is the place where they all exist together to share.
Hi, I'm Myra Chalonen-Smith, and I have an identity crisis. I call myself a goldsmith, but I work in silver, brass, bronze, copper, steel, everything. I do jewelry, I do sculpture, I do hollowware, I do flatware. So I have an identity crisis. Anyway, this is wonderful doing this, by the way, but I think we're all preaching to the converted. What we need to address is you can have all the wonderful schools that we already have. You can have people apprenticing, which is something that I did, as well as go to Sheridan in the 70s. But if you don't have a customer base that understands what you're doing, all these people educated to make crafts, if they don't have somebody to sell it to who understands why it's so expensive and how much effort and time go into not just the making, but the designing, the conceptualizing, all of that, then you just don't have an audience. You don't have a place to put your creativity. You can make it and have it sit there and be admired, but if it's not going to be purchased or used or whatever, what's the point of all of this? So you can educate the galleries, you can but you ultimately have to educate the population in order to create a customer base. The most delightful customers I've ever had are the ones who understand how much effort I put into it and never quibbled about the amount of money I asked for my work. The hardest customer I have is the one that I have to educate along the way to say, who say to me, why is it so expensive? And I have to go through telling them all the steps that I went through. And then they say, oh, I had no idea. I thought because you made this and you weren't a manufacturer, it would be cheaper. No, it's not. And so how do you address that as educators?
I guess absolutely you are right. And actually Paul mentioned it, educating public is the number one thing. And so often, I mean, this is with my personal experience, I'm in a way a little bit personality-wise shy. I usually, most of the craft, one of the things, I think, craft people, work in the craft area, they are great in working in their own corner. And then they are really shy about, to saying to others and going out. And I was like that too. But one of my teacher in undergraduate, if you don't believe in you, if you don't believe what you are doing, and nobody will.
It's true.
Nobody will.
It's
so
true, but the greater population.
Yeah. So basically, individually. Mm-hmm. So again, I'm not the one that also go out to public, and so I tell students, and also I try to do that. Whoever I met, that's what I tell you. Say, whoever you do, maybe you start with your family. Maybe you start with, that maybe small commission that you have. Just tell them that what you do. Just educate them one at a time. That's what I'm doing. That's what I tell them students do that. But I think that's where we have to start somewhere. Mm-hmm.
But you have to ask yourself, where does the public get its education?
From us, they do.
Well, they do from us, but we're very few, and we interface with very few of them.
Yes. So how do we reach out to?
Well, a lot of them go to cultural institutions all the time. So let's say you're, a Torontonian, and you go to the AGO. So you walk in and you say, oh, there's a shop there. Maybe I'll stop on the way out. But you go in and you walk through all the historical rooms, and it's full of crafts. And then you say, oh, this is great. This is amazing. It's so beautiful, But of course, it's old and it's British, so it's good. And then you get to the contemporary rooms, and that experience stops totally. And then on the way out, you walk into the shop, and then it's full of craft again, but it's all cheap stuff that you buy for a gift for other people. So you say, oh, that's what craft is about, that cheap stuff that the AGO puts in the shop, but it's not good enough for the other. It's not good enough for the rest of the place, but it's good enough to be in the shop to raise money to buy contemporary art, because that's what it does. It's there to raise money to buy contemporary art. So that's where they get their education, So they can get their education through all kinds of ways, but they get a lot of it through cultural institutions. I'm a broken record, I know, who are not doing their job, and we're complicit in this,
Just a comment that if you see the gift shop here, you're kind of right. Please.
Hi, my name is Linda, and I'm from, Stratford. A fiber practitioner, artist / craftsperson. I think the craft has a real problem of language and perception, and I think it's one of the things that we have failed to do is really develop craft discourse and find a language that isn't rooted in fine arts discourse, because I think often that is almost used to suppress the voice of craft. It's something I've had a lot of personal experience with. And I don't know if anybody read an article in a crafts magazine. It was actually a letter from the editor a couple of years ago. And the editor had approached an agent or a manager of I believe it was a fiber artist, and wanted to do an article about them in Crafts magazine, that fantastic British publication. And the agent said, no, I think that the context of a craft magazine would negatively reflect on the artist. And the editor was lamenting this and thinking what a lost opportunity for everybody to have a dialogue about craft, whatever. And so the question is, how do we really rehabilitate the idea of craft so that it's something that people aspire to and respect, as opposed to something that we exclude and condescend to? There's a class hierarchy operating, and it's like the elephant in the room that we're not allowed to talk about. So what do we do about that?
Yes. Maybe if I could add a comment to this one and the one before. My name is I am François, and I'm with the Quebec Craft Council. I'm totally new to that sector. I'm not an artist, I'm not an artisan, I'm not an intellectual at all. All I care is my artists and my artisans, and all I want is that they have the better life they could by expressing their hearts. So what we're trying to do in Quebec, we're trying to reposition crafts with the general public, and I guess that's the first problem that we have. We've just conducted a survey throughout the province of Quebec, which was run by an independent company with a standard practice and everything. And one of the things we ask over there, our base assumption from our board members in Quebec, artists and artisans that are living, is that everybody knows what craft is. And I said, bullshit. I'm new to the sector. And before I had an interview with them, I had no fucking idea of what craft is. You talk about family or matière, you talk about all kinds of things, and people have no clue of what craft is. And my basic assumption in conducting the survey was to say probably about 20% of the general population, probably 20% of the general population in Quebec would have a fairly good idea of what craft is. But I was totally wrong. It's 10% of the people in Quebec that could talk at least 2 minutes about craft. That's it. Then, general public in Quebec have a very, very good knowledge of two of our events. We organized one big show in Montreal during December. It's been there for almost 50 years now. 60 years. It will be 60 years in 2015. We have another one in Quebec. It will be 40 years in 2015. People know that those shows are going on. But the notoriety level of the show is extremely high. But ask people what's going on over there. They got no idea. Then you talk about having a product which is a high-end product. Craft products are high-end. They're more expensive. You're talking about tourist shops all over. I went to the Magdalene Island in Quebec, where they have it's probably the highest concentration of artists and artisans per capita in Canada. And it's an island. And tourists that go over there are captive. And they go for a different experience, and they want to see the craft people, and they want to talk with them. And the island has everything to protect itself. But in a given place, to buy souvenirs, you got a shop with beautiful cups, ceramic made, with the typical little design from Hugues de Madeleine, and it's $40. And right beside, new shop open, made in China, same darn design, $10. Fuck, what do you buy? But the tourist is ready to pay $40 in that given context. The island should be capable of protecting its own artisan to do something special over there. And that's an ideal situation. But it reflects what's going on throughout the country. Artisans and artists live in a world, and they believe people know. Some of them do very good and they can have a decent living. Some other ones are just starving to death. They're artists. So I guess that's the role of the provincial councils, to regroup and to find the better ways to educate general public. Then you look at schools for fashion, where they are training the people who are going to be the purchasers for the large stores. They cannot even make the difference between types of felts. And they're the people who are going to do the buying. They got no clue. Look at jewelry. People don't know the difference between the metal, the alloys, the way that it's plated. They'll be doing the purchasing. But people are ready to pay more. If I take an example, and I always say that my phantasm in my job is one thing. If we could do for crafts people in Quebec what has been done for other artisans that are in the food sector. Wow. Ice wine in Ontario 20 years ago. People are ready to pay $50 for half a bottle of ice wine. Foie gras. No foie gras was produced in Canada 15 years ago. It was marginal. In Quebec, people are ready to pay $50 for some foie gras. So there are... sorry.
Yeah, excellent. Merci.
Yeah. I just make a comment. You know, in a way, I don't believe this really has anything to do with making things. It's not about buying and selling anything. I think for me, it's and the people I work with, it's about interacting with the creative process. They enjoy that connection. You know, you know, of course, they get in my case, they get a piece of furniture out of it, but that they can go ahead and use. But it's not really about that. What they're really doing is they're kind of buying into your passion for what you want to do. And so, you know, marketing, I'm just not entirely certain it's, you know, almost like a worthwhile activity. You've got to, as individuals, you've got to make a connection directly with the people who are already inclined that way, is what it amounts to. So, you know, I personally, I just don't think this, in my little corner of things, is all that difficult. Is what it really comes down to. You know, somebody mentioned about the volume of people. There is a huge number of people that would be interested in our work, but you know, you've got to present it to them in a manner that they understand, and you know, they're willing. They get to meet the person, in other words, and it's just not about, you know, seeing cups on a shelf somewhere. It's about making a connection that, you know, can go on for years and if not decades. So I just don't see it as, you know, like a sales issue. I see it more as a, you know, personal kind of exchange.
Okay, I'll try to ask a question quickly. I got the message. We're invisible. We need to be visible. That there are things we can do, and particularly pointed out inequities that are keeping us back, and that we've helped and enabled to keep ourselves there. You also said, and it directed it all at you, but Paul, you said, and the time is ripe. And I found myself saying, yes, and I was ready to charge out. And then I thought, why is he so sure the time is right? So what are some of the indicators that the time is right? And the time is always right. See, I'm wondering whether there are other things, like we now have the internet, we now have tweet, we have ways of public education and reaching out that we didn't have before. So I just raised the question, maybe the time is always right, or is the time righter now? And if there is, are there some of those indicators?
Yeah, I really think there has been a cultural shift in terms of an opportunity for things to change and for acceptance to exist, and for, you know, I'm with Michael. I don't think it's a market thing. I think it's about, I don't think it's about marketing. We've marketed craft for too long, basically, and we haven't been very successful at it. It's about education, and it's about taking the opportunity, you know, that all of a sudden there is a renewed interest from the larger culture. And we see it in contemporary art very, very clearly, and in new technologies and so on, for a dialogue to happen and for an exchange to happen. And I think it's ripe for that to happen. And I say, you know, let's just start at the top. You know?
I do think that using new media gives us new opportunities, and I think we've got to be very open to how young people are using things, and step past our traditions and customs.
like just talking about this invisibility issue, like I had two very interesting experiences in the last, many years now. I got the Chalmers Award about 10 years ago or so. And the other winners were choreographers, theater people, dance people, writers, I knew all of them since I was a child almost. I had read their books, went to their performances, listened to their music, went to their plays, I was very, very familiar. They had no idea who I was. Then I get the Governor General's Award. They were all artists, so I said maybe they'll know me because they're not, just outsiders, they're artists. They didn't know who I was. They had never heard of me. They had never seen my work. They had no clue, And I think that's a problem. I just use myself as an example here to illustrate the depth of invisibility that exists,
Please.
My name is Susie Osler.
And I had been, I had known all of those artists for the last 25, 30 years. I had followed their, they were all very, very, very familiar to me. Their work was familiar, but they didn't know who I was.
Yeah, I wondered if, just on a final note, I guess, if any of you could describe innovative ways that you've experienced in your travels around the world outside of Canada that institutions or organizations or even individuals have used to try to address these problems. Like, what's the most innovative way that you've come across?
Guerrilla knitting. Go on.
Yeah, I'm thinking. I just do I have some examples?
Well, you're thinking about that.
Yeah.
You mentioned education. I teach in the U.S., rarely in Canada. There's one school in the Midwest that I teach at frequently. My classes go on the internet on November 22nd, and it's not unusual that all my classes sell out in, my record is actually 8 minutes. But there's the point I'm making here is there's this huge pool of people in the U.S. that have gone through university programs at some point, and they have taken either sculpture or woodworking electives and so on, absolutely loved it, but they were majoring in electronics or whatever it was. But all those people go back to school in the summers and do evening courses and weekend classes and so on, and we just don't have anything like that in Canada. And I think it's a huge shame. And anything we have, I don't believe is really working to its potential. If you want to take a summer furniture making course, where would you do it in Canada? Halliburton? Perth? Well, they don't run summer programs. They don't. Yeah. So there basically is almost no, is what it amounts to. And so we've got to look at our educational institutes and ask them why those programs are not active. That was my rant. Sorry.
I'm just trying to think about whether there's other country that any institutional the organization has succeed those, I guess that's what your question succeeded.
Yeah, what's the most sort of innovative way of trying to dig craft out of a hole or invisibility? What have other organizations or institutions or individuals, what are they doing now around the world that's exciting and actually dealing with that problem?
I guess, this is a very small sector in Korea. I think it's also, this is a government thing. I think there's if government realized that there's a need to promote, then it really worked very well. I find. And the very early days, you know that in Korea has a living treasure. And when 1970s, very earlier days, there was no such a things. But when government realized that there is a dying, and then they put a lot of money, they put up some system. So now, I mean, old days, they support or even they're living, just doing what they were doing. And now their price of their work is much, much higher than contemporary work, contemporary craft work. So I'm not sure that whether this is the answer, but I think this is, again, it's organizational. If government realize it, that's very important to push. It seems like it worked.
I think the web is a great tool for visibility. You know, like if you would like to be at the National Gallery, send them your stuff. You know, it used to be a lot of trouble to do that, but now it's very easy. We all have digital files of our work. You can easily attach them to an email, and it's easy to find who those people are. It's all online. It takes 30 seconds to find out, and you just say, you know, that's what I do. I'd like you to know about it. Thank you. Bye. Whatever happens, happens, but it sticks. Some stuff sticks. You know, it takes a lot of time, but even if it just bugs them. You know, and I think we should all do that. You know, if you think your work should be in that gallery, send them your stuff. You know, it doesn't cost anything anymore. It's very fast and quick. It's very efficient. We should use those tools. You know, if you think somebody should know about your work, don't just bitch about it.
I just want to add one thing, if this is still working. Passion. Dealers, and I'll take one example, Jonathan Bancroft Snell, who sells ceramics to people in Canada and in the States, and who's passionate but says he doesn't sell ceramics, he sells a story. And so he works tirelessly with the people who buy to tell them and to present them the artist and to show the story, and he records some of that story in videos that are on his website and all that. And people come from the States to his gallery in London to purchase ceramics. So this type of passion is what I think educates the public and reaches out and makes for better buyers and interested public.
In terms of innovation, I recommend Guerrilla Marketing Handbook, and I do think that anything that echoes in the public mind and has a catch is useful. Okay, so I'm looking over here, but I think we're drawing to an end here, and I have a couple of notes. One of them is that the next CCF FCMA meeting is October 2013 in Vancouver. I think that today has been a useful and interesting action, and getting that action out there by documentation and sharing is important. On that note, the audio presentations will be available through the internet after the conference. Keep your eye on the website for availability. I would like to thank the illustrious panel for their work and wisdom. Thank you. I would also like to thank and recognize Megan Black, Deb Dunca, and the CCF FCMA for their tireless efforts on behalf of the sector. Thank you. And I know there were more questions, so there may be a few minutes to grab each other after this. Thank you.
Just like to offer, actually before you leave, I'd just like to offer a few closing remarks too from behalf of the CCF. We really would like to thank you for giving your time and your honest opinions. I know that you've gotten us talking, you've given us some tools, and there's going to be an interesting couple of days as we stay together for our meetings. So I'd also like to thank everyone who joined us here tonight for your questions and comments, your interest, and your attention. It's up to us We know this, to keep the conversation going, and I'm sure that we'll take up that challenge now. So I'd also like to thank the staff of the National Gallery and the Ottawa School of Art who helped to plan and promote this event. And our biggest thanks